You're listening to or watching Talk Amongst Yourself, the solo space where we pause, reflect, and get radically honest. I'm Kaylene. I used to rehearse my boundaries like a script. I'd soften every no with a smile. I'd feel guilty for choosing myself. But I'm done performing peace. I'm choosing myself, and I'm not going to apologize for it. We often say yes to avoid conflict. And I know for a fact that I'm really good at saying yes just to avoid conflict. There are some people that you just don't say no to. And I just think part of that is because we don't want to deal with what we know is going to come, you know? And I think that not being able to say no to those types of people, we truly can't set real boundaries with those people. Boundaries that we can cope with and respect within ourselves. And I just think that we let those strong personalities, not let us have those boundaries. So that makes for conflict, right? I mean, if we say no, we know they're going to pitch a bitch or something's going to happen and you just don't want to deal with it. Sometimes I just deal with it, but there are other times where I just know I am mentally not able to deal with it. So I just don't say no. But at the same time, when I don't say no to those types of people, and sometimes when I don't say no in general, um, who is it hurting? It's hurting me because then I end up in a place that I don't want to be. And when I do say no to those people, right, which is very rare, but when I do, I tend to over explain my boundaries. Like, um, oh, well, I can't go because this, that, and that. Or, you start using other people like, oh, well, I have this thing with my mom or blah, 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 right? Like, we over explain shit. And honestly, I don't even think people care about those excuses. I think a simple no should suffice. But no, we tend to just keep talking and talking and talking until pretty soon I don't even know what the hell I just told you I was doing. So yeah, I'm definitely working on that. I'm definitely working on just saying no and not over explaining myself because it's really easy to do. And I can become long-winded, but whatever, I don't care. It is what it is. And if you know me, my brain is always ticking and I'm always thinking about something. And sometimes I can come back to that subject days later because I was thinking about something else about that subject. So whatever, you're just going to hear it anyway. And I think another thing that is also brought into that is we tend to feel guilty when we say no. Sometimes guilt overwhelms us, and guilt is something that I've been working on for years and years and years. And let me tell you, there's only probably one person on this planet that can guilt me into anything, and that is my mother. She can still guilt me into probably anything, anything. And that's something I have to deal with, and that's something that I have to resolve within myself. And I truly do believe that, there is a cultural aspect to saying no as well. Uh, with family or work, we tend to be culturally conditioned. For example, we hear people say, be nice, don't be mean, don't be difficult, keep the peace. And that's, when you have to keep the peace, that's the whole thing about avoiding conflict, right? Because, we have to worry about our image, we have to worry about how people perceive us. And I think that is what creates a problem with boundaries, with us being able to have boundaries, because in society we're expected to be a certain way, right? Like, we're expected to be skinny, we're expected to be pretty, we're expected to be beautiful, we're expected to be dressed nice, all kinds of things, when it's for work, when it's for a funeral, when it's for other things, we have these expectations and these norms that we follow. And I think some of them are good. Don't get me wrong. I think some of them are good and some of them are probably in place for a very good reason. And why we've adopted some of this stuff is probably for the better. But at the same time, like, for example, I mean, if we didn't have police, there would be no order. Can you imagine what it would be like? But then at the same time, there are just going to be some bad police officers, just like there are going to be some bad, you know, funeral directors, there's going to be some bad plumbers, all that stuff. But without these kinds of things and without these kinds of people, society can't really run. But I think when it comes to boundaries, that's something totally different because for me, that's like a personal choice. I do believe that everybody should have a choice to live their lives the way they want to, as long as they're not hurting other people. And, part of this is also within this cultural conditioning of boundaries that we've learned and not having boundaries and always saying yes is these gendered expectations that are put upon us, right? Um, and there is a difference between gender and sex, people. Just to let you know. So sex is biological, okay? Gender is like made up, you know. It just is. It's not, gender doesn't it's not physical, but sex is. You can't really control the sex because that is pretty much how you were born with those chromosomes and stuff like that. I mean, people would probably tend to differ with my opinion of that, but whatever. It's not biology. Gendered isn't. But in society, we have these ways that we're supposed to be. If you're a female, you're supposed to be soft. You know, and boys are supposed to be tough. And, they're supposed to be family boundaries that become betrayals if you don't, adhere to protecting the family. That's how it becomes a betrayal. And, you know, it, the family dynamics, it's almost like it becomes approval addiction. Like, I have that approval addiction. I can't speak for you. I'm sure I know some of my friends would agree with this, but I for sure have approval addiction. Like, I'm always seeking my mother's approval. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a relationship and my partner, or whether it was sports, or whether it was my writing, or, I still tend to seek her approval. It doesn't matter. I'm still seeking her approval, even on the small things, because, I don't know, maybe I felt like I wasn't good enough, or, maybe she felt I wasn't good enough, but things like that happen. And so we get stuck in those expectations and that family dynamic of approval addiction. Like I said, I'm 53 years old, and I promise you, I've been seeking this woman's approval for 50 years at least. And 3 was probably when I understood approval. I know that that sounds young, but I was a pretty smart 3-year-old, just saying. And yeah, that's the one person that could probably guilt me into anything. And, some of that guilt also stems around, like, for example, I could give you a few examples, like people want us to help them move, or, to use my truck to move. Well, I'm going to tell you, the truth of the matter is I am 53 years old. Okay. When I turned 40, my body started changing. I have been an athlete my entire life, and a collegiate athlete at that. And college definitely does something to your body, because I mean, you're practicing 3 times a day when they allowed three a days and all year round. And I did this for like 5 years. So it was kind of crazy. And now I'm paying for that. All those sports, from the jumping to the landing, my knees hurt, my body hurts, everything hurts. And I'm to the point where I've forgotten what hurts because I'm so used to the hurt. So, I don't want to go to your house, and I don't want to pick up that box, and I don't want to put it in my truck. It's just that simple. I mean, I'll drive, but I ain't carrying no boxes out there. That's pretty much about the furthest I'm going. And no, you are not using my truck because it's my truck. And the only other person who drives that truck is Tina. So, and sometimes a family member if necessary. But I just feel like I shouldn't be guilted into helping you move. If I don't want to go, I don't want to go. And, a lot of that is usually because I'm not feeling good, whether it is physically or whether it is mentally. When it's a mental time for me, My wife is probably the only one who knows that, and she knows by the tone of my voice when I tell her I don't feel good. She'll know by the way I say it, whether it's a mental feel good or whether it's a physical feel good. And I do have both of those. I'm assuming that everybody else does too at some point. But at this age and going through menopause at the same time, my body is not the same. I don't I hate even admitting this. I don't have the same strength that I used to have. And I think that a lot of us that are aging don't like to admit that. We don't like to admit that we're not as strong as we used to be. And I will wholeheartedly admit that. I am nowhere as strong as I used to be. I used to be able to lift up boxes of just albums upon albums. And now I'm trying to move stuff in my garage, feel like I just ran a marathon. I've only spent 5 minutes in the garage stacking about 4 boxes and I feel like, oh my God, what just happened? Yeah, it's not fun. So aging isn't fun, but you know what? All you people that are sitting there bragging about being young, you're going to be here someday. Or, actually, if you're lucky enough to get here, because this is a privilege to be this old. And, you know, I'm not worried about what you think, but I just kind of, you know, wanted to talk about these boundaries that are so hard for us to set. I think, I rarely have said no. I think I've probably said no more times in the last like 3 years than I have in the last freaking 40 years. And I'm serious. People used to call, they'd be like, hey, let's go to the bar. All right, yeah, let's go. There'd be times when I didn't feel like going, but I went anyway. Why do we do that to ourselves? I think we do that to ourselves because we tend to worry about how we're perceived in the world and how our friends perceive us, and are we going to lose that relationship if we say no? Are we going to be seen as a bad person? And I don't think anybody you know, goes out there and says, "Oh, I think I'm going to be a bad person today." But I think that we could be guilted into saying no. I mean, guilted into feeling bad about saying no, or we feel like we have to make these elaborate excuses up to say no. And I'll tell you right now, if you call me up 2 days before the event and you're like, "Oh, sorry, basically I forgot to invite you," guess what? I'm not going because I probably have plans already because it's 2 days before your event. B, I'm probably pissed off because I know your ass forgot about me. And, C, I just don't want to be in a crowd. It's just that simple. I just don't like crowds anymore. I don't feel comfortable in crowds. Honestly, I don't even like people. I mean, that is true. Sometimes I just don't want to be around people. The human with what is going on in the world right now, I just can't stand some of you. I can't. I cannot stand the fact that, you know, the USA is supposed to be the greatest country in the world. And right now, we're the most hated country in the world. And that to me is just not acceptable. And it pisses me off that so many people, just let go of their morals to do what they did. But anyway, that's not what this conversation is about. This conversation is, let me get back on track because, you can go down the rabbit hole and then you find yourself somewhere else. But I'm trying not to go down that rabbit hole. So let's get back to the topic at hand here. Um, I think that saying yes, saying no, how has that shaped like our relationship with self-esteem, you know? Um, there are those people where you say no and then they're pure total asses about it. Like, well, God, now I'm not gonna be able to blah blah blah, whatever, and a lot of that is mostly family because let a friend tell me that we're gonna be fighting. I'm just letting you know. But, let you say no to your family and oh Lord, all hell's gonna break loose and pretty soon so and so is calling you saying, "Hey, I heard blah blah blah." And it's just all of a sudden it's around the entire family. And I have a very large family, so you can imagine how many phone calls I'm getting or how many texts, but you gotta set boundaries. And honestly, I started my boundaries years ago. One of the boundaries I set was and I said no to was people borrowing money. If you need to borrow money from me, please feel free to ask, but it doesn't mean you're going to get a yes. I will tell you, the people that have not burned me for money, I'll probably say yes. I'll probably give you a chance if I got it. If I don't got it, I don't got it. But there have been times where I have people ask me for money, and I'm not talking about, like little sums of money. I'm talking about like, can I borrow $500 till Friday? Yeah, I've done that. I've even done $700. Yes, it's happened. And those two people paid me back when they said they were going to pay me back. And so I'm okay with those two people, but literally the bank of Auntie Kaylene is closed because, I'm done with people thinking that these loans are not loans, that they're gifts. They're not gifts. If you tell me when you're going to pay me back, I expect you to pay me back. So now my boundary is it's a no. I'm going to say no. And I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I'm tired of feeling guilty about it. It's not my fault that you're in the position that you're in. I can't. I cannot accept that. And I'm not going to take that on for you or anyone else. I think that you shouldn't. I don't think anybody should have to take that on. You shouldn't have to feel guilty for saying no. And a lot of times we do, and how do you reconcile that? How do you learn to say no? I mean, I'm definitely still learning how to say no. Like I said, there's certain people I won't say no to because I just don't want to deal with the drama, because I know as soon as I say no, all hell is going to break loose and the whole world is falling apart in their lives and it's your fault. And then they expect you to go over there and pick up the pieces. So, yeah, there's still a couple people that I don't say no to depending on what it is. You know, it is what it is. And I just deal with it. And that's on me. That's on me to deal with. That's on me to learn how to say no. And sometimes I do say no. There are some times when I just don't want to go. I'm just not feeling it. And I will say no. But at the same time, I will give a freaking dissertation as to why I'm not going or why I said no, which is purely dumb. I should not have to give this long excuse of why I'm not going, but sometimes you kind of feel like people don't believe you, and so you feel like you have to explain yourself and tell them every freaking detail that you possibly can so that they understand. And I got to stop doing that because, quite frankly, you probably don't care about the 10,000 pages of details in a text. You probably just, I don't know. And if you do care, I'll tell you. But if you don't care, don't expect that from me anymore because it ain't coming. And yes, that's part of me working on myself. Honestly, people, we are not responsible for how others feel about your boundaries and my boundaries and saying no. If they feel upset about the fact that you said no, that's on them. That's on them. They're the ones who are feeling upset about it. And there's nothing you can do about it. Either they're going to be mad or they're not going to be mad. But don't invite me 2 minutes before the happening and then be mad at me because I say no. Don't invite me to a wedding where I haven't spoken to you in years. Like, why am I going to even go? Why am I even going to honestly acknowledge that? You know what I mean? Like, I just don't understand that. Like, it's almost like you're a last second thought and you haven't talked to these people for years. So, no, I'm definitely not going. I'm definitely probably not even sending you a card. I mean, so don't expect that. Don't expect one in the mail. Don't expect an Amazon gift card. Don't expect an email. Don't expect anything because you're probably not going to get anything. I don't know. That's just how I feel about it. It's a no. It's a no for me. And I feel, at first, when I first started using no, I felt really guilty about it. But, I'm getting to the point where, like I said, the only person that I could feel guilty about is my mom. I mean, this is going to sound dumb, but my mom, she loves my grilled cheese. And there are times when I physically just can't. And it'll be like after work or something. And I'm just extremely exhausted. And she'll be like, oh, let's do grilled cheese. And I'll be like, no. And then she'd be like, you never want to do anything. You never want to make me grilled cheese. Duh, 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 duh." And sometimes I'm going to feel guilty as hell. I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to get my ass back up 5 minutes later and I'm going to make that grilled cheese. But you know what? There are times when I just can't. And so I don't. And then she's angry about it. And, I'm not going to feel guilty about it. So, I have to feel unapologetic when I'm physically not feeling good. So that's something I'll also put out there. Um, I've really been I was thinking about something, like this week and what I was going to do. And I kind of think that I'm going to put an assignment out there um, that I think we can all complete. And I don't need to know about it. It's not something you need to report to me, unless you want to tell me. But I think that you should try one unapologetic no this week, just about something just for you, and give no justification for that no. Like, for example, if you just don't feel like doing it, just say no. You know, um, I know that it's hard to do that at work. It depends on what it is. You really can't look at your boss and be like, no, I'm not doing that. Right. So don't do it there. Don't practice there unless you feel like you can get away with it, but don't do that. But there's got to be something where you just don't feel like going, just say no and don't give a reasoning. Just say no. I mean, whether it's because you don't want to, if I don't want to, I'm not going to do it. Seriously. And I mean, how many times though, seriously, do we tell people, no, we just don't want to do it? I'm going to venture to guess that we don't tell very many people that. Like, um, I probably only tell my wife that. Like, I'll be like, no, because I don't want to. No. And she'll be fine with that. But I mean, can you imagine? I mean, I don't know how that would feel if I told my friends, no, I just don't want to do that. I wonder how that would go off. I wonder if they'd be like, well, okay, cool. Or if they'd be like, and then not call you back and then not invite you and then be mad. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't think I've ever tried that with a friend. No, because I just don't want to go. I don't think I've ever tried that with a friend. I don't know if any of you have, but I would be interested to hear that story and how that went for you. But I don't think I've ever done that. But this week I want you to do that. I want you to not, I mean, don't do that exact thing, but I want you to try to give an unapologetic no, just a no without any justifications, and then just move on and see how that works. And it's going to be hard, especially if you're like me and you don't usually say no, and you just say yes because you're just trying to avoid a fight, or you're just trying to avoid any type of drama. I'd be interested in that and how that worked out for you. Uh, there boundaries are just things that we need to put out there, and the boundary of no, I think, is a very important one. And I think we can all learn to stop explaining ourselves when we don't need to. Just don't. You don't have to, and you don't have to explain yourself to me if you don't want to go either. In fact, I'd expect you to either say yes or no, and if it's a no, it's a no. Or if it's a no on that day, we'll find another day. That's just how it is. But I think I can respect the boundaries of no and yes. Your no's are your no's, and they're your no's for a reason. And like I said, maybe some people just aren't feeling it. Maybe some people just don't like that activity, but they're afraid to say they don't like that activity. I don't know. All I know is if you're still learning to choose yourself, me too. If you're still unlearning the guilt, me too. You don't have to say yes to be loved, because if there is that type of condition on you where you have to say yes and them to show you some love, then that relationship ain't worth it. You need to just walk away, honestly. And, if it's not worth it, then they will walk away. It is what it is. And it just means that they were there for a season, and you don't need to know, I guess, the reason why they're vacating. Sometimes we need closure, sometimes we don't. There are some people who have vacated in my life and it's fine. I didn't fall apart without them. It's cool. And I'm sure they're not falling apart without me. So you don't have to say yes to be loved. Anyway, I'll be back next Sunday. Until then, I'm going to say stay soft, stay brave, and stay grounded, because I truly do feel like the most important thing in that sentence is grounded. Stay grounded. Really. Um, with the world the way it is, I think grounding uh, to this earth and to Mother Earth is important. And you know what? Keep talking amongst yourself. Thanks for listening.